I'm now going to look at the research onion framework. Okay.
We already discussed onion framework.
Not the onion, research design framework. Thank you for updating me. This is a framework developed by another author, actually a couple of authors. Main author is Sekeran. So let's have a look at the viewpoints of Sekeran in explaining the research design. Right. This is his framework. You can see now. Can you see the screen?
Can see. We can
Okay.
see.
Right. You can see a set of colored boxes and unshaded boxes, correct?
Yes.
When you look at the shaded boxes, they are used to explain what kind of a research it is. If you look at the unshaded boxes, they're used to explain how to collect data, what is your sampling technique, and how to test the reliability of your data and things like that. Okay. Now let me explain. This one says that the research, when you look at, can be categorized based on the purpose of the study into one of these three. You can see exploration, description, hypothesis testing. What you mean by exploration is you look at the study and see whether it requires an analysis in depth. Example, now you all suggested qualitative approaches to certain studies. So if you think about, say, for example, conducting interviews and analyzing a situation in depth, then it's more of a qualitative type of a study. What you mean by description is you try to conduct a study, but you're not concerned about identifying or studying the relationship between variables. Now, a while ago, I showed you an example with respect to archival research. So we saw that, how the males and females across different education levels have their salary differences or wage differences. Okay? So are there significant differences when the education level increases, and how it differs based on industry? And likewise, you find that this can be interpreted. Okay, give me a second. Sorry about the interruption, because we had a problem with the internet and complained to the telecom, so it came out. That's why. So here we find exploration is a research where you have a lot of in-depth analysis. Description is where you try to describe the situation without trying to study the relationships. Hypothesis testing is where you try to test the hypothesis, like you know what hypothesis, and we did quite a lot of examples as to how to formulate hypothesis. If your research involves testing hypothesis, then it says hypothesis testing research. So that is the way this one has described the purpose of a study. Next one, type of investigation. He says causal. When you say causal, you find that you're testing a cause and effect relationship. A good example is the one that I showed you earlier with respect to the experimental research. Why? Because you had a lot of controls. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Right. So you had to control, you to make sure that the ages of the patients in both the groups are the same, and likewise.
Yeah.
That's what we mean by causal research. The cause and effect relationship. Correlational research is where you don't try to control anything. You try to test the correlation between two variables as it is in the context. So most of your researches involve these correlational studies. Group differences are where you study the differences, say across the groups. I showed you this wage differences study. Then I said, okay, when you look at the more educated crowd, then you find the difference is even more, that kind of thing. If you look at the next box, you can see extent of researcher interference. So is the researcher making any changes to the existing setup? If so, there is manipulation involved. If you just distribute the questionnaire, so if you just conduct your interviews without any change in the context, then we say there is a minimal interference. Okay. Now, good example is conducting a survey. You don't make any conditions, any changes. You just collect the data without making changes. But if you're doing a causal research, then you have to make sure that the control group has the same characteristics, and likewise, there is a lot of manipulation. Study setting is where simply have you changed it or not. So in an experimental research involving causal relationships, you find that you have to change. So we say contrived. Otherwise, if you just collect data, we say non-contrived. Unit of analysis, right? I'm going to ask again, say questions from you based on examples, so to understand this very carefully. Unit of analysis meaning the unit around which the data is aggregated. Example, you're doing a consumer behavior study to find what factors affect the loyalty of people to a certain bank, right, or a certain supermarket, or a certain, say, mobile communication provider. Okay, you ask questions about, say, what makes them loyal. Is it the brand? Is it the service quality, or what? Then you ask, okay, how loyal are you? Now what happens? You're asking the questions related to the independent variable as well as the dependent variable, and then try to connect the answers, right, across the respondent. So what happens is, let's say you ask questions about the independent variable and the dependent variable. This is independent and this is dependent. This is one respondent. He or she has this much of perception towards the dependent variable and this much towards the independent variable. So you have your respondents like this, right, plotted like this. And then you say, okay, this is the line that best fits your data. That's where you apply correlation analysis and regression analysis. Now, here, your correlation analysis, right? You conducted when the things were as it is, right? And here your unit of analysis in this case was each and every respondent. Now I'm going to ask you a question. Think carefully and ask and give me the answer. We're going to do an analysis. Now, we know that right at the moment, more than 170 countries have been affected with coronavirus. We want to find whether there is any connection between the actions taken by the government to control this has actually been able to mitigate or bring down. Okay, what is the unit of analysis? You ask every government, did you set up the centers for coordination, and then did you set up a mechanism that did you close down your country, did you provide mechanisms for people to get their necessities without stepping out of the houses? Did you provide the essential services to those who need? Did you provide, strict control through your, military forces? If so, to what extent have you been able to, control the affected cases? What is your unit of analysis?
Cannot see.
Each, but you look at each country, did you realize it?
Yeah.
Each country you ask, okay, how is it the facilities, right? How are the facilities and how is the situation? So you're aggregating the data across each country. A simple example would be, let's say you look at each country and to what extent the literacy level is, and then you look at their GDP. So you again have your country as the unit of analysis. Okay, so this again is very important because lots of students, don't understand it clearly. Then the time horizon is just the same as what it was, one shot of several points, which is longitudinal. So this is how the research design explains its way of categorizing a research. And the unshaded boxes, you can say that explain they are in the very core of the onion. Okay. Because the core of the onion looked at how to analyze the data, how to collect data, what kind of sampling techniques, and so on, right? I want your ideas about the two. Which one do you like most?
This one, research design.
You think this is better than onion?
Yeah, because this is like some kind of scientific.
Why the onion is not scientific?
It's more generic.
Why do you think this is scientific?
Because we used to like follow some kind of systematic approach, like problem statement.
Why is onion not systematic?
It has what are the kind of things in each layer, but the steps need to follow is not clear that much of in onion.
Why? Because if you look at this, my viewpoint is this. In the onion, you get a complete view because you start from the broader view, the philosophy, and then you gradually filter. Okay. if you look at this, you see just 1 point exploration. This one looks into the all kinds of qualitative research only through exploration. That's it. No elaboration of it. Okay. And then he looks into the causal relationships, correlation relationships, so on. He looks more biased towards quantitative research because you have to have a hypothesis to test in causal as well as correlational relationships, right? Right, and then the causal relationships relate with the interference being more and correlational less, again connected with the study setting. And unit of analysis is required for you to connect the two sides. You have to know. And this is the same as that.
Yeah.
So this one does not focus at all on the philosophy, at all on various different strategies, okay? And does not talk anything, not a word about mixed method or various methods to choose. So, however, he seems to be more towards, say, more explaining towards what is less explained in the core of the onion.
Yeah.
Right? So, these are the differences I see. So, I always leave it to the student to choose. Some students say explain their approach to through the onion as well as the design both, right? So
It's method.
both methods. I mean both the frameworks they use to explain their research. Some students, okay. Then some students, a majority of the students use the onion because onion looks more complete than this. Okay, right? So this is how you can compare the two. Now, keeping this in mind, okay, if you look at our previous set of topics, what has happened? Right. So let's have a quick look at them so that we can see how best we can describe them. If you look at this, the celebrity endorsement, it's a hypothesis testing research, correct?
Yes.
And it's a research where you have minimal interference by the researcher, okay? And it's conducted under non-contrived conditions. We don't have any controlled situation here. We let things happen just the way it is, and then we do our research without disrupting the setup at all. Okay, right? What is unit of analysis?
Different celebrities.
The respondent, you and I.
Yeah.
If I give the questionnaire to you, you talk about to what extent you look at the attractiveness of the celebrity, the trustworthiness and the expertise of the celebrity, and to what extent you buy these beverages. So the two sides, independent variables, are connected with each and every respondent, where each and every respondent becomes a dot in the scatter diagram I drew earlier. Is it very clear? Right. Now, if you, on the other hand, come to this, the same situation, you ask each and every respondent, okay, how loyal are you? What is your viewpoint about the service quality, the brand image, the price, and the value addition, and so on and so forth? How do you look at these? And how loyal are you? So again, the X and the Y is connected through the respondent. What about this? Okay, you find the same thing. You comment about, say, what you perceive to be the visual merchandising practices, and then you comment about to what extent you tend to make an impulse purchase. Okay. So again, the respondent becomes the unit of analysis. However, I'll go to the end. What do you think about this? What is the unit of analysis? If the NPA is collected with respect to each branch, okay?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Each branch, I said, then your branch is the
Unit of
analysis. Clear?
yeah.
Okay, right? So that's why, even sometimes supervisors don't understand this much. So when you don't know what you do, you make big mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So, what is the unit of analysis here?
Personal response.
Each
Recruitment.
each graduate, okay?
Yeah.
Each IT graduate, what do we ask? We ask them, okay, to what extent did you practice? Do you think you have your personal identity? To what extent have you developed your personal image? To what extent have you developed your personal positioning? Okay, did you get your dream job? Get it? Okay, right? So each and every IT graduate becomes the unit of analysis here. And if you look at this, each and every investor becomes the unit of analysis, right? This is each and every person who visits coffee shops and becomes the respondent for the survey. Each and every tourist who looks forward to stay in green hotels, right? Each and every respondent here who uses, say, the impact of credit cards on include the card holder repayment behavior. Yeah, the credit cards. Okay, and then you find here each and every employee, sorry, each and every tourist, and then I will skip this and come back again. Here, each and every, it's a complicated research here. Each and every subordinate is asked, but their responses are aggregated and combined to connect with the organizational performance. So the unit of analysis is each company, because you don't find multiple CEOs for each company, correct? Right. So, it's a simple thing to understand, right? Here, again, each company, because we connected the different cultures, characteristics, and we aggregated the employee retention, although the respondents were employees, we aggregated the retention, their perception about the cultures, and then connected with the retention of that company. So company became the unit of analysis. Now, it's very easy. Here, each millennial, okay? Clear? Who plans to buy life insurance. However, now here, each respondent who purchases clothing from Kelly Felder, right? Now, here it is each SME, okay? So it's quite clear, quite straightforward. However, if you look at this kind of research, be careful. The same interpretation of unit of analysis is difficult to be interpreted here. Okay, you look at it in a different way here. Even in qualitative research, what they interpret as unit of analysis is completely different from what you find in quantitative analysis. So here we look at the patterns, right? What happens in Sri Lankan context, and to what extent they tend to practice certain techniques, and how it is has affected. So your explanations are more verbal. There is no correlation here. Clear? Right? It's more explanatory. It's sometimes called narrative or storytelling. Okay, that's the approach you have here. Look at this, right? Same situation here. Right? So in qualitative research, what we mean by unit of analysis is the smallest common theme that we identify is called the unit of analysis. It's not the same interpretation. So therefore, we don't try to describe what is unit of analysis when we talk about qualitative research, right? Because it is a different meaning altogether. So I mean, if you look at furthermore examples here, it doesn't make any sense. You talk to experts and their viewpoint is analyzed to identify the patterns, right? So the same meaning in the quantitative context cannot be attributed here. So is this one, and of course this one, right? It's only one national park, so you can't simply have a unit of analysis as such. So now with the Sekeran's perspective, when we have different research, say, problems to look at. Okay, so let's see whether we have anything more in detail to look at. So here you can see exploratory studies explained as say a means of finding out what is happening, to seek new insights, to ask questions and so on. He doesn't bother to further explain whether it's going to be ethnographic or archival or whatever. He doesn't say anything, right? So I had given you the descriptions. You can actually go through. This is what we mean by how we look at the Sekeran's perspective, right? So once again, let's come back to your chapter 3. What do you get in chapter 3? You have to first of all give your conceptual framework. Then you know that you have to give your hypothesis. However, in qualitative research, we do not give hypothesis because as we go on interviewing, we might even find more variables than we initially thought, or even change the initially identified variables in the conceptual framework. So because of that, we don't write hypotheses, but we do write something called propositions. You might say a bit similar to hypotheses, but we certainly don't have the null and alternative forms there because we have a more kind of open viewpoint in terms of identifying the variables. Then in the chapter 3, you next step into the operationalization, where you present the variables. If you have dimensions, give the dimensions. Otherwise, give the indicators. And very specifically, what indicators are there for each and every variable. After the operationalization comes the research design, either explained through the onion or the Sekeran's model, right? Or sometimes I find students using both, because they say this is the way I can explain using Saunders. This is the way that I can explain it using Sekeran's viewpoint. So fine. right? However, try to manage with the word can't you have. So now I have actually given more details here. You can see the study settings. I have said non-contrived and contrived, where I initially said contrived is conducted under artificial setting, and non-contrived kind of a, everything manipulated. Non-contrived is at the natural setting. However, Sekeran, as I said, is smarter than Saunders in this, because he goes on to explain it a bit more detail in terms of how to make these manipulations. You can see here, he says, field studies are the kind of studies like surveys uh, in the case of Saunders' description, where we just distribute and then collect data and then try to figure out the relationship between the two variables. They're called field studies. Absolutely no harm or no control to the environment. Whereas field experiments are, say, the kind of studies where you don't make strict manipulations, but you have some kind of moderate interference. If I put it across this way, let's say you want to find whether there is a difference in consumer behavior when you introduce a buy one get one free offer into supermarkets with respect to a certain product. So you choose 20 supermarkets and you introduce the buy one get one free offer within 10 supermarkets, and do not do it within the other 10 supermarkets. Now here you don't have those strict manipulations, because obviously it is not possible here, but you still introduce a change. Okay, so these kind of things sometimes are called quasi-experimental studies, because they are not truly experimental as in terms of controlling, but we can't say no controlling, because there is a mild interference, giving it to one party and not giving it to the other party. Lab experiments necessarily does not mean that you performing the experiment within a lab, but you can of course assume that the manipulation happens at a very high level. I mean, a simple example. Let's say I want to test whether a particular brand of fertilizer is helpful in, say, the growth of chili plants. So what I can do is I can have two beds of chili plants, and then to one I apply the fertilizer, to the other I don't. So, however, I make sure that both the beds have the same soil condition, have the same level of sunlight, have the same level of water treatment, have the same level of humidity and everything else. Only difference happens to be one group gets fertilizer, other group doesn't. Okay, so this is also a lab experiment, because there is very strict control, but we don't perform it inside a lab though. So yeah, this is how you can describe the study setting. So with that, I hope you would have got say fair understanding of the Sekeran's perspective, right? So with that, I'll show you a bit about the mixed methods and a few more other things that should be brought in to the chapter 3. If you are doing a mixed method, what kind of approaches are there for you? You can see here, this author is quite known, and he has a nice book also on mixed method research. His name is Creswell. So you find three different types of mixed method designs. what you mean by triangulation is you don't place say importance on either quantitative or qualitative data. Instead, you give them equal importance rather than giving one side more importance. So you start analyzing qualitatively, you start analyzing quantitatively, and see whether the two sides can be brought together to explain the story and whether both sides come to the same conclusion. Okay, that's the triangulation. Explanatory mixed methods meaning you're looking at the say the study where you give a lot of focus to the quantitative analysis and whatever the findings that you make using the quantitative analysis, you try to follow up with a few interviews. Okay, so those interviews are not sort of detailed descriptive explanations of the findings. You're just trying to see, okay, what have you found from the quantitative analysis? Can that be further explained through the interviews? That's the viewpoint you have. So obviously you give more importance to the quantitative. Exploratory mixed method design is where you conduct the study qualitatively and later on you try to say sometimes even collecting more data on the same to build up explanatory sort of a theory with that say with the first round you collect data to conduct interviews to understand what the variables are actually operating, and then later on you collect more data and then quantitative analysis. So it's building up into a theoretical model in the second stage. So it's qualitative then quantitative. Earlier one is quantitative followed up with qualitative. First one is you have both together, like say coming along two different pathways to reach the same destination, kind of. So whatever, in our research, I find that our students are more comfortable with their mixed method studies when they have the explanatory mixed method. Okay, because you have to think about your word count and then include both. So this becomes the more easily practiced method with respect to our students. So then again, in your chapter 3, you have to include methods of testing reliability and validity, methods of sampling, and also say the methods that you adopt in say say testing explaining the ethics that you have practiced in your research. Okay, so these are the things that we have. So do you have any questions from what we have discussed today? Do you have any questions?
No, okay.
You're okay. I have a small issue where I won't be able to have tomorrow morning because what has happened is everything is jumbled these days because of the, initially we did not have the lectures as planned, and later on only every institute came up with the methods. So I find it very difficult to plan. So we are. I want to have a lecture on Monday at tomorrow, 4 o'clock. Are you comfortable?
Can you make it 4? Because after work, I'm coming around 4:30 to.
Okay. Even 5 o'clock is fine.
No, 4:30 is okay with me. It's all right.
All right. Are the others okay at 4:30?
Yeah, I'm also okay.
Okay. Hold on a second. I'll ask from Vidya.